We pestered them and pestered them. Like, are you guys using Fallout? They weren't doing anything with it. Can we do something? And eventually they said yes.
It's now ours, and we have always taken the approach that Fallout 3 is being made as if we made the first two.
On July 12, 2004, in a press release, it was officially announced that Bethesda Game Studios would be developing Fallout 3, licensing the rights from a struggling Interplay Entertainment. And only a few years later, Bethesda would acquire the Fallout IP from Interplay, who were forced into selling the IP away due to the company's enormous issue with debt and their need to pay off creditors. News of this purchase began around 2006, but it officially became a reality on April 9th, 2007. Leonard Boyarsky, art director of the original Fallout, infamously said in 2004 about Interplay's decision to license the franchise away, "To be perfectly honest, I was extremely disappointed that we did not get the chance to make the next Fallout game. This has nothing to do with Bethesda. It's just that we've always felt that Fallout was ours, and it was just a technicality that Interplay happened to own it. It sort of felt as if our child had been sold to the highest bidder, and we had to just sit by and watch. Since I have absolutely no idea what the plans are, I cannot comment on whether I think they're going in the right direction with it or not." Fallout 3 did face skepticism before release, with some fans of the franchise feeling left behind, as Bethesda drastically changed the beloved IP, taking it from 2D turn-based combat to 3D real-time combat. Regardless, Fallout 3 was a massive hit, receiving universal acclaim from both critics and users. It would also go on to sell millions of copies and win numerous Game of the Year awards. Bethesda was on top of the world following the release of Fallout 3. If 2006 Game of the Year winner The Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion did not already make Bethesda Game Studios a household name, this certainly did. Bethesda and a few other developers at the time, like BioWare, really built the foundation for a genre or style of games that has become heavily popularized today, and that is the open-world first-person role-playing experience. Fallout 3 represented an experience that has really defined this industry in recent years, or at the very least, the experience that many enjoy today, which is a massive, dark world to explore, tons of choices that actually matter, interesting characters, unique interactive factions or groups, various types of enemies, tons of loot, customization, and a well-written narrative. Fallout 3 was a truly revolutionary title that at times featured some horrifying, dark humor mixed with an art style that truly made players feel that they were adventuring in a nightmarish, broken, and twisted apocalyptic world. One of the defining moments from Fallout 3 for myself is when, or if, you decide to blow up Megaton. Interacting with the sole survivor from the explosion, Moira Brown, who is now a ghoul, is just uncomfortable considering what had just transpired and her very unique reaction and description of being nuked.
Oof, don't be silly. Why would you blow up our town? You're talking crazy talk. Well, okay, as long as you're sorry. But I expect you to apologize to everyone else in town, okay? And don't do it again. Now, what am I going to do about work? And what's with the weird look? Have I got something on my face? Don't be silly. I just got some gunk on my face after the explosion. But that doesn't explain why it peels away in strips. Ugh, and oozes. You know what? I think I'm turning into a ghoul. This is fascinating.
Now, this single moment is, at least in my opinion, it's depressing and disturbing, which is the right emotion one should feel. Other moments like the creepiness of Tranquility Lane, horrors of Vault 87, and the reveal of President Eden just show the brilliance behind Fallout 3, although there still were issues with the writing, with some things not really making any sense, like the whole concept of Little Lamplight, or even the original main story and its ending, which had some extreme logic issues mixed with bad written dialogue. Following backlash and Bethesda realizing how they butchered the ending, some of this would be later fixed somewhat with the Broken Steel DLC. As good as Fallout 3 was in my opinion, it's often overshadowed by Obsidian's spin-off Fallout New Vegas, which is considered by many to be the best 3D Fallout game to date. Obsidian, with much of their staff at the time being former Black Isle developers, they had a background in the Fallout franchise, as some of them literally were responsible for creating it. They had a deep understanding for this franchise, and in many respects, they improved on a lot of things that Bethesda did in Fallout 3. Obsidian Obsidian, as they always seem to do, brought some top-notch writing and far more role-playing choices to New Vegas. Although yeah, this is a very brief overview of the Fallout 3 versus New Vegas debate that still rages on today. Regardless, Bethesda created something special with Fallout 3. It's why we even got New Vegas, and Bethesda built upon Fallout 3 with some great DLC expansions, which included my personal favorites Point Lookout and Broken Steel. But after that, there was a real hunger for what was next from this talented rising developer. Fortunately, that wait wasn't long, because only a few years later the groundbreaking release of the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim came to be, and it solidified Bethesda's reputation as one of gaming's top AAA developers, with hype and anticipation through the roof for the future. Speculation and rumors would run wild about the long-awaited and expected Fallout 4 until the company officially announced it in 2015, but that's really a key point in time when it became abundantly clear to many that Bethesda, they were not perfect. While the developer enjoyed a great deal of success, Bethesda's releases over the years were extremely buggy, janky, in some cases completely broken. Many of these problems were connected to their aging and now dated game engine. There was also the issue with monetization, as Bethesda drew anger for selling horse armor DLC years before with Oblivion, and more infamously, the company attempted monetizing the massive Skyrim modding scene with paid mods. Due to enormous backlash, that initial plan would be canceled until the somewhat different Creation Club arrived a few years later. Bethesda had problems, glaring ones that did not really get taken serious at all. That can be blamed on various factors, but even with 2015's Fallout 4, these same problems were present but mostly ignored, although, as with previous titles, modders came to the rescue, creating massive unofficial patches to address issues and bugs unaddressed by Bethesda's official patches. Fallout 4 additionally featured a new sort of criticism, which was Bethesda's decision to cater towards a more casual audience by scaling back on the role-playing story side of things in favor of improving combat, introducing voice protagonists, and adding a settlement building feature, among other things. There was a time before Fallout 76 that this was the most controversial Fallout or Bethesda Game Studios experience to date, one that has been heavily debated, with my own conclusion being that Fallout 4 is a good game overall, with some bad writing and a main questline again that underwhelms, which seems to be a consistent issue with Bethesda titles. So yeah, Fallout 4, good game overall, but just not a great role-playing Fallout game. There were massive mistakes made with the decision to restrict dialogue options to only 4, having these choices only defined by a few words, which often did not represent the actual answer that you wanted to give, and the illusion of choice being offered with certain responses just being another way of saying yes or no to a question and not actually being a different response that gives a new outcome. Also, it didn't help the dumbing down and lack of skill checks that many loved in both Fallout 3 and New Vegas, but here is Bethesda's lead writer and designer discussing the difficulty of making that dialogue system work.
The dialogue system, as you see, it's very fluid in the game. You know, you have like every time you talk to an NPC, there are 4 options. Well, for the designers, this was something of a nightmare because every interaction with any NPC meant that they had to write 4 responses for anything. You know, they might want to tell a guy that, like, yeah, the restrooms are over there, but they had to write that for it in 4 different ways, right? It became a logistical nightmare.
If you're here to talk me into working on Liberty Prime, you can forget it.
What changed your mind?
Nothing changed my mind. I promised you I'd return to the Brotherhood, and I've kept my end of the bargain.
Do I need to remind you why you made that promise in the first place?
No, that won't be necessary. Tell Proctor Ingram to get her scribes ready. It's going to take a hell of a lot of work to get Liberty Prime back online, but we'll get it done.
Now the good news is that the mighty Todd Howard himself admitted in an interview at E3 2016 that yeah, this system did not work. Of course, Bethesda clearly thought during development that the average user didn't want a bunch of boring old dialogue to read, so instead offering simplified responses, sometimes just based on emotion, was the better route to take, but they were wrong, as all it really did was limit player choice and create problems for the game designers who are at times forced to add extra pointless dialogue, but also forced into limiting conversations that sometimes need more than 4 options. Simply put, saying an emotional goodbye to a character with only dialogue options being goodbye, speechless, gotta go, this can't be the end, isn't exactly helping to create an atmosphere that the player, should feel emotional. It really just undermines these moments or situations. This is one of the primary issues with Fallout 4 as a whole, which is Bethesda moving away from traditional role-playing elements in favor of the combat, action-packed, let's shoot some super mutants side of things. That was clear with the basic dialogue system, and also the overall lackluster writing, the settlement building feature, which was a huge focus at launch and post-launch, but never really had an actual importance in the grand scheme of things, and the poor mission design, which basically boiled down to go there and shoot that most of the time. Fallout 4 had problems. Fallout 4 was somewhat controversial in the Fallout community, with most of the hardcore fans taking issue with Bethesda's design decisions, but much of the casual audience feeling the game was criticized too much, and actually did a lot of things right, like the implementation of a modding feature which made it possible for console players to experience the extraordinary creativity that the Fallout community has become known for, and the undeniable, impressive environmental world design, which yes, in my opinion, is Bethesda's greatest strength as a developer. But see, after Fallout 4's release in 2015 and then Skyrim Special Edition in 2016, a lot of people were wondering, what could be next for Bethesda Game Studios? Todd Howard had teased in multiple interviews around this time that they had 3 large-scale long-term projects in development. There was all kinds of speculation on what he meant by that, with arguments being made that he was including maybe a remaster or a VR game or a mobile title as one of these large projects. Eventually, during E3 2016, it would become clear, thanks to Bethesda VP Pete Hines and Todd Howard, that these 3 projects were actually $60 AAA games, and one of them was The Elder Scrolls 6, which would be the last of the 3 to release.
People shouldn't necessarily look at what we've done and say, we're just going to alternate a Fallout and an Elder Scrolls. They're obviously universes we love, but they're things that we want to try in gaming, whilst they would still be very much a Bethesda Game Studios style game, or something that people would expect from us while being different. These are I'm having a hard time answering this. How do I answer it while being not too cryptic, but you know.
It's actually really interesting looking back at all the theories believing that The Elder Scrolls 6 would release in 2019 and Fallout 5 would be out by 2022. Unfortunately, that timeline was quite wrong, but for a while it was a huge guessing game of what's next from Bethesda. The obvious first option, despite Bethesda saying it wasn't coming soon, was The Elder Scrolls 6. The second option was a Fallout spin-off, which made sense as we got that before with New Vegas. Third was a new IP, maybe being a space sci-fi RPG, possibly the mysterious trademarked Starfield, and lastly, could a Fallout 3 10-year anniversary remaster come to be? These were the options. I myself expected a Fallout spin-off, and I was right. If you're an older viewer of mine, you know that I often cited Bethesda's huge legal dispute over the Fallout Online trademark, which led to a settlement, and Bethesda Softworks already having an Elder Scrolls Online live service. I just felt that it made sense. A big old Fallout 4 with friends like experience that could be treated as a live service. I've discussed this in a recent video, but it does appear that Fallout Online is probably next in line. This is certainly something that many fans will not want, just like ESO, but the sad truth is, from a business perspective, it just makes sense. This AAA games industry has a love affair with turning single-player franchises into live services. With ESO, it exists to keep the massive franchise bringing in recurrent consumer spending. Leaving a single-player franchise dead for a while just is not how this industry works anymore. Everything is monetized to its full extent. Everyone wants the next GTA Online. And a Fallout live service made sense, as we all knew a Fallout 5 was likely years away. And I believed a mysterious Fallout spin-off live service would be developed by Bethesda because of the company in recent years choosing to use less external development teams. It made sense, but I ended up being wrong with what Bethesda actually would develop and what it would actually be named.
And again, it just...
On May 30th, 2018, following a cryptic day-long stream from Bethesda Game Studios and various developers popping in, Fallout 76 would be officially revealed for the first time with a teaser trailer. Now, following this teaser trailer, nobody really had an idea of what the game actually was, and many assumed it was just a Fallout spin-off, especially it didn't help that Fallout 76 pre-orders went live even before anyone knew what 76 was. Reports from Kotaku and other leaks began to emerge, claiming this to be an online survival RPG resembling titles like DayZ and Rust. Of course, many were in denial by this news, believing the reports to be lies. Even I was a bit disappointed at the time, but remaining hopeful largely because Kotaku had confirmed there still would be a main storyline and quests for players to take part in. And then came E3 2018 when the game was officially revealed for the first time in a larger capacity, and Bethesda themselves confirmed the reports, but also did a great deal of downplaying concerns that you couldn't enjoy the game as an offline single-player experience like past entries in the franchise.
We are really excited about everything that we've shown here tonight, but I know there are a lot of you who are really here or really wondering about Fallout 76. And I'm pleased to tell you that your wait is finally over.
We have always wanted to tell that story of what it would be like for you and the other characters who were first to leave the vaults. But there is one big difference with this game. It's that each of those characters is a real person. Because yes, Fallout 76 is entirely online. Of course, you can play this solo, all right? You'll be who you want, exploring a huge world, doing quests, experiencing a story, and leveling up. We love those things about our games too. It would not have it any other way. But also, like many of you, we have always wanted to see what our style of game could be with multiplayer. Open world, survival, every person and character is real. And it was an idea that we just couldn't shake. We knew we had to do it and do it in a really big way.
Now, it was clear that Bethesda knew that they couldn't just come with this Fallout 76 announcement because it would leave people feeling underwhelmed. So what they did was show what the people have been wanting, trailers for both Starfield and The Elder Scrolls 6, which offered just a taste of what those games will be about, but were really just title screens and nothing more than that. But it confirmed that those games were in development, ending the years of continuing speculation even before it happened. And Bethesda's belief was that this would help ease concerns about a Fallout Live service. I think it's accurate to say many had indeed expected a Fallout spin-off with maybe an optional co-op mode, a Fallout 4 with friends, but a full-blown Fallout Online was not expected, especially because of the dated game engine being used, which already has had a lot of problems and issues in the past for Bethesda's single-player games. It was noticeable with Fallout 4. But for the most part, things remained hopeful for Fallout 76 in the coming weeks and months before release. I myself was staying optimistic, but also Red Dead Redemption 2 was releasing right around the same time, so that was really all I cared about for a while. Questions surrounding monetization were a big concern following what had transpired a year prior with EA's disastrous Star Wars Battlefront 2 online loot box casino, which backfired big time with government bodies getting involved. But for Fallout 76, concerns were met to an encouraging response from Bethesda VP Pete Hines, who on multiple occasions made clear that there would be no loot boxes, no pay-to-win items, and the game would be cosmetic only. Additionally, he would also mention all the game's post-launch content DLC would be free, which was great news until it wasn't, and wasn't again, and was not again, and was not again. You get the point. But more on that a little later. But in the build up to Fallout 76, everything was set. Opinions were kind of mixed based on some of the previews given from content creators and journalists who Bethesda flew out to take part in a limited playtest of the game, but I think everyone wanted to see what this actually was in present day for themselves, as the preview event was said to be an earlier version of the game. So then came the beta, which began on the infamous Fallout date October 23rd when the bombs dropped, and that's where everything started to completely fall apart, turning into one of gaming's biggest nightmares ever.
Take me home to the place I belong.
We always start with the world, and this time it features all new rendering, lighting, and landscape technology. It allows us to have 16 times the detail.
Fallout 76 was a buggy and broken disaster that had the Bethesda community shook. Many would complain about the timing of the beta, knowing issues raised would likely not be properly addressed until weeks after the game's launch due to the beta being so close. So, what followed was the actual release on November 14th, which included a massive Day 1 patch that was larger than the game itself. Many had been holding out hope that the giant Day 1 update would drastically improve the game in terms of how it performed and the actual content present, but that didn't really happen. It was still a big bad buggy, broken, at times disaster that featured some extremely unique game glitches and some straight up lazy game design choices, with the Scorchbeast Queen literally being a copy and paste reskin of Skyrim's dragons, with users discovering in the game's code that Bethesda had used the same exact animations and scripts. Even beyond the hundreds if not thousands of unique bugs that players encountered, the actual game itself, when working, was just bad. It was basically a create your own fun experience with friends and little more than that. The actual story there, told through holotapes and robots, was extremely boring and lacked any intrigue as everyone was just dead around you. And the endgame content was just launching nukes to stop Scorchbeast, so who really cares? I'll circle back to the story side of things later, but I actually do think Bethesda had a somewhat interesting narrative premise that was never explored. Had there been human NPCs to actually show the tragic fall of Appalachia's Brotherhood of Steel, the Fire Breathers, the Free States, the Responders, or the evil and twisted decisions made by the Raiders and Enclave, I think Fallout 76 would have been viewed drastically different. It's just that Bethesda didn't want to give that much effort for this live service at release. The plan was to buy people into a vision of what it could become, instead of what it actually was come launch day, a problem this AAA games industry keeps doing. Bethesda thought the Fallout brand, no matter the quality, would sell itself, but they were wrong. Selling a $60 unfinished, unpolished, greedy, lackluster turd turned out to be a costly mistake. What frustrates me the most is that there was potential here. Instead, though, Bethesda gave us the post-credits of a tragic story of people not coming together for the common good that could have been interesting, but that would have required time and effort and resources, which was not the focus at all from leadership. It was all about getting this out the door ASAP, something confirmed to me from a developer who worked on Fallout 76. So I want to circle back to some rather unique remarks that came from Fallout 76 design director on building Bethesda stories, because it's relevant to 76.
So what's the story with Bethesda stories? How do we make our stories, and how do I personally make my stories? I thought, it's funny, I had never really thought of the process that I use to write stories and make games, and then I realized I do have a process. And I started to put it together. I realized that there are 3 primary points that I use when I create a story for one of our games. The first is, KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. The next, write what you know. And 3, this is a big one. Great games are played, not made. This is one of Bethesda's studio mottos, but this is a personal motto for me as well. So, going to the first point, KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. What does that mean? Well, for me, that means when I'm coming up with a story for a game, I like to concentrate on strong central themes. And 1 or 2 strong central themes is enough. I find that think of a good movie or think of a good game, and you can usually think of a good movie or a good game with a good story, and you can usually realize that there's a strong central theme, a strong undercurrent, right? See a bad movie, play a bad game with a bad story, and sometimes it's a mess. I saw a movie recently, which I will not name, that was kind of a mess, and the story was all over the place, and it really didn't know what it wanted to be.
See, the thing is, sometimes settling for a basic, simple story sets up failure, as the narrative of 76 lacked zero intrigue at all. Also, I know Emil probably will again be lead writer on Starfield, the next Bethesda Game Studios title, and I just hope he stops having the story's opening driving force being the player leaving a home in search of someone or following the journey of someone, whether that be a dad, a son, or an overseer. or actually maybe just a refund. Fallout 76's original story was a missed opportunity that ended up having many players not even bothering to care about it. But besides the narrative, the actual world design was solid. As I said earlier, this is one of Bethesda's strengths. But again, because of there being no dialogue options, no human NPCs, tons of busy work, repetitive enemy encounters and events, no unique loot locations, the intrigue to explore and venture deep into certain locations was omitted. Fallout 76 was just bad. It was a mixture of conflicting ideas that did not blend together at all. Bethesda wanted players to make their own fun, battle other players through PvP, roleplay, explore the world with friends, and also complete story quests discovering what happened to Appalachia, but unfortunately none of this worked well at all. The option to also play solo was there, but again, it was honestly kind of depressing. Overall, Fallout 76 was universally hated at release, with the game receiving a 53 out of 100 based on 136 critic reviews, with just 7% of critics recommending this experience. Like many Vault experiments in the Fallout universe, it was a failure. But what followed was about a year long of consistent controversies and disasters that hit this experience almost non-stop. I really think Bethesda did the impossible, creating so many different types of controversies that people just stopped caring. The screw-ups literally became normalized. In a somewhat brief rundown of some of the more notable debacles, on November 27, 2018, just about 2 weeks following release, news began to spread of a United States law firm announcing a deceptive trade practices investigation into Bethesda's problematic refund policy, which at the time made it that once you download the game, you were not entitled to a refund. Eventually, this would lead to the law firm pushing forward with legal action against Bethesda, and almost a year later in Australia, ZeniMax, the parent company of Bethesda, would be forced to offer Fallout 76 refunds to certain Australian customers, and they would admit that they likely misled these customers about their rights to a refund when they experienced issues with Fallout 76 at launch. Now, on November 28th, 2018, this is when the whole nylon canvas bag debacle began to blow up, which boils down to Bethesda selling a $200 version of Fallout 76, which comes with a power armor helmet, the main draw, and a few other items including a canvas bag. But for some reason, Bethesda decided to do a last-minute switch in material with the bag to a cheap nylon and did not at all decide to notify customers before purchase of this change. As you might expect, many were upset to find out about this change, feeling lied to. A Bethesda representative would admit in an email response to a customer that they did this to save money, something that Bethesda would later dispute. But Bethesda's first way to try and remedy the situation was offering $5 in imaginary Bethesda money, or well, the Fallout 76 premium currency. Again, they would receive backlash for that. Backed into a corner, this would lead to them eventually promising to send canvas bags to upset customers, although that would take about 6 months. Days later, Bethesda would enjoy community outrage with a controversial patch that made the game more grindy with hidden changes not previously outlined in the game's patch notes. Bethesda would end up making a Reddit post apologizing for this and vowing to be more transparent moving forward. But a day later, on December 5th, those customers upset with the nylon change were told to file a ticket on Bethesda's support site to ensure that they would get eventually what they were promised, and only one huge problem: the customer data would leak, with dozens having their private information exposed publicly due to a Bethesda website bug. 1 week later, and yes, I really am trying to do a quick rundown, players would discover a sort of gameplay affecting lunchbox in the game's files, which was a sort of loot box that was shown later in action and leaked footage of the supposed now cut feature. These sort of loot boxes, along with perk cards, would be found to be connected to the game's Atomic Shop store, which likely meant at one point in development Bethesda planned for these items to be purchasable. 2 weeks later, banned Fallout 76 players were given the option to get their accounts back as long as they wrote an essay on why cheating in an online live service game is detrimental to an online game community. So a homework assignment. In all honesty, this is probably the most funny of the many debacles, but fast forward to mid-January 2019, players would discover a secret developer room that included every item in the game, including unreleased content. It also included a human NPC named Whoopi that was likely meant to be a sort of testing dummy for developers to use. Unfortunately, the secret room was actually not so secret, as certain hackers or cheaters reportedly kept quiet on finding the secret room for weeks and would steal or take items from this room. Towards the end of the month, Bethesda would start to break their cosmetic-only promise, in this instance by selling Atomic Shop costumes which featured gameplay effects. A few months later in April, they would follow this up with the Atomic Shop exclusive repair kits, a pay-for-convenience item as Bethesda describes it, that for just a few cents instead of, grinding for materials, you could skip this game system by purchasing a repair kit. Create a problem, sell a solution. There would be an improved repair kit that could be obtained through gameplay, although that one is a rare drop. Next we have is the days before E3 2019, in which Todd Howard sat down in an interview with IGN and admitted that they knew Fallout 76 would have a rough launch. Howard would also admit that their reputation has been damaged, they expected some level of backlash at launch, and they did not expect to get great Metacritic review scores for this game, as Todd Howard would for some reason say that this is not the type of experience that gets those scores.
An idea of how it's going to land, or were you caught off guard by the launch of that
We
game?
knew we were going to have a lot of bumps. That's a difficult development. A lot of new systems and things like that. Hey, we're going to go try this new thing. And anytime you're going to do something new like that, you know you're going to have your bumps. You know that a lot of people might say, that's not the game we want from you. Difficult development on that game to get it where it was. And we were ready for, a lot of those difficulties ended up on the screen, and we knew, hey, look, this is not the type of game that people are used to from us, and we're going to get some criticism on it. And a lot of that very well-deserved criticism. We knew that going into this. We knew it's not that, right?
Yeah.
You would say, look, this isn't a game, even from the beginning, this is not going to be like, high Metacritic game. That's not what this is, given what it is. But we felt strongly this is a game we want to play. This is something we really want to do. And all of the games like this, whether it's us or somebody else, you can go back and look at them. There's a period once you launch. It's not how you launch, it's what it becomes. And, can't be prouder of the team that's worked on it. They've worked tirelessly.
Now, days following this interview, another one would pop up from PC Gamer, in which they interviewed some of Fallout 76's lead designers who defended the company's introduction of repair kits, calling them a pay-for-convenience item that totally is not pay-to-win at all, ignoring the fact that they created a problem and sold a solution. Moving along to July, a patch would go terribly wrong, reintroducing tons of old previously solved bugs, and again the developer would add another controversial pay-for-convenience item called scrap kits, which this time was exclusive to the Atomic Shop. Nearing the 1-year anniversary of the game's beta release, Bethesda would announce a delay of the Wastelanders update to spring 2020, which I think the general consensus was that it was a smart move and best that Bethesda take their time and get it right. But unfortunately, days later, on the actual anniversary of the game's beta, Bethesda would announce Fallout First, a new subscription service that included key content that fans had been wanting since day one, and it was all paywalled. This included private worlds, NCR Ranger armor, atoms, emotes, and a scrap box. It was a premium membership for exclusive content and items that again goes against what Bethesda promised day zero, and the community was enraged about this, especially the timing, which was simply laughable. A few weeks later, Bethesda would again come under fire for banning helpful Fallout 76 community members that had worked with Bethesda community managers to discover and test cheats. Next, to mid-December, a hacker going by the username ErectBand would begin wreaking havoc on Fallout 76 by unleashing cheat scripts that at first allowed hackers to add Fallout 4 assets like a naked Preston Garvey or the Prydwen to Fallout 76. Only a week later, ErectBand would follow up with an attack that allowed hackers to steal entire player inventories in seconds. Videos would begin circulating of hackers griefing hundreds of players. Bethesda would come out with a hotfix about 24 hours after this hack went public, and would eventually weeks later help impacted players get their items back, and much more. ErectBand would continue creating chaos in the weeks to follow, with various other cheats that turned the online game upside down. But before the year did end, Bethesda put out a blog which downplayed all the chaos that had happened all year long, and instead only brought up the good moments that occurred. Finally though, to our last notable debacle, we had Bethesda VP Pete Hines sit down with Greg Miller and talk about Fallout 76's disastrous launch. Hines would defend the Fallout First subscription service, admit that he gets angry when people call Bethesda liars because things just change, and he would defend not delaying the game, claiming that there were issues they couldn't have envisioned happening.
I think I've mentioned this to you before, but you don't get Horizon Zero Dawn if that team sticks to what they were known for and had always made. They pivoted and tried something that I think is substantially different than what they had made before, and it's one of my favorite games of the last 5 years. And so I mean, you're hoping that when you try something risky and different that you end up with Horizon Zero Dawn and not with a lot of bumps and issues, but that doesn't mean you're doing it for the wrong reason.
Right, this game that launched in a state you weren't happy with, certain players weren't happy with, everybody knew there could be...
I mean, we can go further than just certain players.
People
Greg. Like,
weren't happy
I'm
with
pretty self-aware. Yeah,
I know you are.
Okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't call you on here.
Yeah,
it
was more than certain.
All right, everybody hated and thought it sucked.
There was
Is that
enough
what
of
you wanna
those.
hear?
Yeah,
Sit
that's
there
the
and
one
take
that gets to me the most.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is the like, you lied to us. Like, it just bothers me because that's not, I guess, the main thing that I sort of beat the drum on in terms of how we're going to do things. But at the end of the day, it's also semantics. Like, if I said, hey, Greg, I'm taking the Kind of Funny crew to Chuck E. Cheese on Saturday, it's going to be awesome, and you're all excited about going to Chuck E. Cheese, and then Friday I come down with the flu, like, sorry, bud, we're not going. You know, I have boys, they're significantly older now, but when they were little kids, they'd be like, you lied, you said we were going to Chuck E. Cheese. Like, no, bud, I didn't lie. Like, I planned on taking you. Stuff
Situation has changed.
Right? At the end of the day, he's still mad, whether I lied or he's just not going. He's mad. If I tell you, hey, here's what I know that the plan is and what we're doing, and then down the road those plans change, I just got so much of the, like, you're a liar, and it just bothers me a lot because I know that's not how I approach things. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Like, even if I convince you that I didn't lie, you're still going to be angry that we changed our minds. So what does it matter?
So these are just the most notable examples. There's just so many patches that included problems, anger over atomic shop prices with power armor skins or bundles, costing the price of many discounted top-tier games. There was controversy over a holiday sale in 2018 that was basically a scam because the sale items were added to the store discounted, creating the illusion that they were discounted. There were also tons of exploits and bugs that created chaos and other small things that were more funny than anything else, like Bethesda selling a premium Fallout 76 jacket for $276, or someone sending a box of bobby pins to Todd Howard to complain about how the item was weighed in the game.
Some people sent letters.
Yeah,
Some
we
of
do
those
get
are very,
letters
Some of
from
those are
time
very
to time.
creative. I got a box of bobby pins the other week that said weigh these. So whoever sent that was the most creative letter I got.
Now, I would be lying if I said everything went wrong before Wastelanders. I mean, it mostly did, but there were some bright moments here and there, with the Nuclear Winter Battle Royale mode being pretty fun for some time. Other updates like Wild Appalachia were met to a positive reception from the community, and I actually really like the introduction of the Purveyor, which allows players to get rid of unwanted legendaries and exchange them for script, which then can be used to buy different types of randomized legendaries. But none of these updates inspired really any hope of a bright future until now, because yes, Wastelanders is some solid Fallout fun that actually improves on some mistakes made with Fallout 4. Fallout 4 with co-op was exactly what Fallout 76 should have been, but Bethesda didn't want to do that. Instead, they thought pushing out an unfinished monstrosity was acceptable. I still believe they wanted this to be a game built on PvP content, as that is far cheaper and easier to produce, but that interest was never there, because surprise surprise, Fallout fans like narrative and they want just that. Bethesda was forced into doing what they always should have done: invest the time and resources on story-focused content with human NPCs that you can actually interact with. This was really the only route Bethesda could have taken. Fallout 76 is intended to be a live service that is likely around until Fallout 5 comes to be, and that really could be another 6 to 7 years away, if Bethesda's pace of releasing new games stays the same. The good news is that Wastelanders is finally a strong push in the right direction. It does a lot of things that quite frankly put a smile on my face. Maybe it's just because I'm happy to see there is signs of life from Bethesda, but a lot of work and passion went into this update. So many locations have been updated, given a new look and reason to explore. There's now 2 always hostile factions scattered across the world, being the Blood Eagles and the Cult of the Mothman, who have taken over and set up camp all over. In some of these camps you'll find notes and holotapes, which in this capacity it just works. It adds to the world building. It's why it has worked so well in past Fallout games, because the terminals, holotapes, and notes provide new lore and some interesting background, but they're not the main form of storytelling, which is key because yes, it gets boring listening to hundreds of holotapes with zero interaction with these individuals. It's also predictable knowing all of these holotapes would have the same conclusion, ending with everyone dying for whatever reason. Both have found Foundation and the Crater are really interesting new settlements complemented by the unique characters that you can interact with there. I found the Raiders to have a far more compelling cast of characters, with Rara being a little chaotic but adorable, reminding me of Sally from Fallout 3's Mothership Zeta DLC, which also had her going through vents and helping unlock doors for our character as we made our way through a level. Johnny Weston was also a really unique character that was well written, and overall it just seems like the Raiders are far more fleshed out compared to the Settlers in my opinion. Like even the individuals that take charge of each of these factions, the leaders, Paige and Meg, it's at least clear to me that the Raiders' Meg is the more interesting character, while the Settlers' Paige comes off just a bit bland, which maybe that's by design. But another big addition that Bethesda made was adding some new early game content. This update basically has two sections, a smaller one featuring the Wayward, which you see as soon as you exit the vault, and the big one which is the Settlers versus the Raiders, and the mysterious treasure of Appalachia, which is somewhat built up first through the Wayward content. Regardless, even the Wayward questline perfectly introduces new game systems for players to take part in, like using a camp for the first time, and it also gives the first real decisions to the player. A solid dialogue system that actually shows that Bethesda has listened to the criticisms of Fallout 4, features skill checks and varying amounts of options that feel like real options, not the illusion of more choices. The dialogue system also allows us to decide how this Wayward questline plays out, and I appreciate that you can be a big baddie if you want to do that. But probably the biggest interactions we have is with the Overseer, who will provide her thoughts on certain decisions that we make. She mainly serves as an entry to the Settler and Raiders questline, but Bethesda did do something really neat, which is allowing us to return for a massive reward all the 24 holotapes to her that we can find throughout Appalachia that she left for us. It's a nice way to compliment those players who did make their way fully through the base game story. Another really neat change that Bethesda has made is adding to the lackluster base narrative of Fallout 76, which is still quite rubbish, especially now, but at multiple locations as you make your way through the Overseer tapes you'll encounter human NPCs, which add to these locations, and even in some cases, if you say the right dialogue options, you'll receive some bonus items like a Stim Pack Super. Nothing major, but for a new player, this is extremely beneficial. Also again, each of these characters are somewhat unique, with most having a sort of connection to this specific Overseer's tape at said location. I particularly found Joe Crais at Camp McClintock really interesting, as he's this army private who is really passionate about being in the US Army, citing his family's background of serving, and he himself is now at this base training, but I suppose is too scared or unwilling to go out into the dangerous world. Throughout Appalachia, there's quite a few nice little interactions that you can now have. I recall running to a mission but stopping after I found a man chopping wood and complaining about both the Raiders and Settlers. Another interaction was near a river in which a scavenger has a very brief conversation with us about comic books, and if you act nice, he'll give you one. There's also various traders walking around now, and even a secret random encounter companion that you can find. This is the world building that was missing from Fallout 76. Other than that, the game actually now has a radio DJ, Julie, which I personally have not listened to too much of the Fallout 76 radio or music, but with this update I did, and I really enjoyed the music choices and dialogue from Julie. Bethesda also apparently got Jason Mewes to portray the Ghoul Mort, and even brought back Fallout 3 Owen Lyon's voice actor William Bassett, who portrays the companion of the Settler Forager, who I believe is nicknamed Gramps. In total, I believe there's 5 companions that the player can gain, although only one can be active at a time in your camp, and only 2, Sophia the Astronaut and Beckett the former Blood Eagle, are actually fully fleshed out with side quests for us to take part in. Unfortunately though, while these companions do have some interesting backstories and some choices, the quests we're tasked with are basically a bunch of go there, kill that, or go there, grab that. It's a bunch of boring busy work that does lead to at least something, which is a proper side quest conclusion and some good loot. There's also the option to romance these characters, which besides some dialogue it kind of seems pointless, at least for now, and specifically with Sophia I noticed a few dialogue skill checks with agility to improve her combat skills, which I found actually pretty neat. Overall, these companions are okay. They do have interesting backstories, some great voice work, and maybe writing that was a little too basic, but I think they just kind of pale in comparison to really all of Fallout 4's companions, but they're there, that's good. Some other really neat details that I noticed were NPCs commenting on your appearance, like if you take too many chems, they'll point that out. If you actually nuke the crater or foundation, everyone will just start wearing hazmat suits, which I understand understand this cannot be like Fallout 3's Megaton because this is an online game with other players, but I'm glad that they at least did something, although yeah, it's a bit goofy, but it's something. There's some really unique things connected to Fallout lore that took me by surprise and honestly created more questions than anything, like why is so-and-so in Appalachia? And I'll leave that at that because I don't want to spoil anything. The new weapons and armor are pretty great, like the bow is fun to use and Chinese stealth armor is a blessing. Unfortunately, a lot of the new items are locked behind a new gold currency, which I found a bit disappointing, as you'll have to grind daily quests and certain events for a while to get the new top tier stuff. The game just looks better now with what appears to be lighting improvements and some changes made to how markers are shown in the game's map. Some nice quality of life improvements all around. There's been some new enemies added, which includes floaters that I saw quite a bit throughout my time, and the new Wendigo Colossus, which I unfortunately did not find because it's a very rare spawn in a blast zone. Some of the new events added I really liked. For example, riding shotgun, which sees you defending a caravan along with some other human NPCs from Blood Eagles. It's a ton of fun. Beyond that, moving to the actual main narrative of Fallout 76, I found it to be, it's fine. It's not great, it's not bad like the base game, but it's just fine. Bethesda writing has always been rather meh. Like comparing New Vegas to 3 or 4 76 is a night and day difference in terms of quality, but as I mentioned earlier, I still think that the base game story of 76 could have been something so more if it had been told differently, but that did not happen. Now, Wastelanders' main questline has some fun missions, like the rah-rah level or mission or quest, whatever you want to call it, I mentioned earlier. There's also one mission in which takes a very dark turn fast, one that has you solving a mystery, another with you battling it out in a sort of arena, and one that has you dealing with the repercussions of one of your big decisions that you have to make towards the end of the quest line. There's a decent amount of variety offered, and thankfully, it isn't always go there, shoot that, or grab that like it is with the companion side quests. I will say that I found the conclusion of this update a bit underwhelming, but Bethesda accomplished what they needed to. They created a foundation for a potential bright future. But I should emphasize, this update is simply the beginning, because there still is problems. Like the sheer amount of bugs still present is concerning. Once again, another duplication glitch popped up following this update, forcing Bethesda to take player vending machines offline. Although to Bethesda's credit, this is the most stable I've seen the game yet. Besides the reported exploit from this Wastelanders update, for myself, I did experience NPCs glitching through walls or floors, occasional interact buttons not showing or working on NPCs that it should work with, and enemy AI just not working at all. Like the beginning of the Beckett companion quest was bugged completely with Blood Eagles spawning in, but being invincible, naked, and not moving. This happened another time in another Blood Eagles camp as well, but I'm thinking that this was later fixed, maybe, as I have not seen this happen since the day the update went live. Regardless, Wastelanders is the most polished content to date, and a lot of props has to go to that PTS server, which should become a permanent thing moving forward. Overall, Fallout 76's Wastelanders is a step in the right direction, finally. If you were hoping this to be Fallout 4 with friends, it still really is not that, and I'm not sure if it'll ever be that based on how the game works, which is a lot of grindy busy work that will be unappealing to many looking for that typical Bethesda experience. If we're being honest, this should have been what Fallout 76 was at launch. This finally does accomplish one of the goals that Todd Howard claims was present at release, and that is the ability to play the game solo and have a good time. This is my preferred way of playing games. I love single player, and it's the first time I can say for a fact, yeah, I actually am interested in loading up Fallout 76 every once in a while. But you'll probably recognize a lot of the positive things I mentioned, like random encounters or interesting human NPCs, is kind of the bare minimum, as these are common things that you expect to see in a Fallout game. But Fallout 76 is a unique case, and yeah, these basic things are indeed refreshing to see in the game now, like choices and consequences. At one point with the Raider questline, I was able to convince Meg to do something because I had the necessary skill checks, but because I did that, I missed out on a quest which would have had me meeting a dying human NPC. And later, once I finished this update, I decided to check the location to see if I could still interact with the dying human NPC, but when I got there, they were no longer alive. It really is the little things that I do appreciate. Now, the actual verdict on Fallout 76 is still a wait and see, largely because the monetization stuff with this game is frustrating, and I do have concerns moving forward. I truly wonder how this game will continue to be funded. Are the microtransactions already implemented enough, or are we going to see more pay-for-convenience nonsense? I have to imagine an update like Wastelanders was costly, and I just wonder if the returning and new players will be enough for Bethesda. Bethesda. Also, when I say Bethesda, I don't mean Todd, I mean the executives and leadership of ZeniMax, like Linda Carter's husband, Robert Altman, who leads the company, is actually banned from banking after being caught up in a sketchy business deal in the 90s, which led to a massive federal investigation and trial that did lead to him being acquitted, but he was forced to settle with the Federal Reserve, and he did that by agreeing to be banned permanently from banking. The more you know. Other ZeniMax executives include Donald Trump's younger brother Robert, baseball legend Cal Ripken Jr., former MGM chairman Harry Sloan, disgraced former CBS chairman Les Moonves, and filmmaker Jerry Bruckheimer, among others. Strange group, honestly. But getting back on point with 76, as I said before, I still really take issue with these utility items, which I don't care what people say, it's selling a problem that Bethesda themselves created. I've heard people consistently claim gaining resources or gaining atoms is easy, but the issue is that these microtransactions, like the repair kits, exist because of a flaw in game design. There's no other way to look at this differently other than the fact that Bethesda could fix this with an update to certain perk cards, but instead they chose an attractive microtransaction, which is even more attractive right now because it seems weapons and armor is degrading faster than usual, which maybe that's a bug, but it's certainly beneficial towards Bethesda. Now, from what Bethesda has outlined for the rest of 2020, it's difficult seeing another massive update like Wastelanders coming this year, but I have to believe with the foundation set, it should be easier adding new NPC content that further gives backstories and quests for a companion like the Settler, Forager, or even the Taylor family. There's opportunities to expand on what's already here. There's not a need yet to bring in another large faction, although there was quite a few mentions of the Pit, which makes me wonder if a faction from that area or something to do with that region will become a larger focus in a future update. Either way, Fallout 76 is yet another AAA live service game attempting a comeback, and for the first time, it seems possible, but I do find it deeply concerning this growing trend of unfinished $60 dumpster fires at release being delivered upon the world with a promise that things will maybe get better one day. That's not something I wish to see normalized, and I somewhat already think it has, which just means fun times ahead, especially here on this channel. But Fallout 76 has transformed into something more. It's still not very good, but I do think if updates like Wastelanders continue to be delivered in the years to come, the tune will change on this game. Already it looks like it somewhat has, with Steam reviews of the game turning mostly positive, and most of the reviews or impressions coming from gaming websites being pretty positive on Wastelanders. It's just annoying to me that it took Bethesda so long to understand their own fan base. Like Rockstar Games with Red Dead Redemption 2 Online, they knew that they could not ditch story content in the online mode because the main draw for the franchise and the game is the story. So what they did was add a ton of PvP content, but also included story and character missions. Personally, I don't find that story content even comparable to the base game story of Red Dead Redemption 2, but I respect that Rockstar at the very least is understanding of their audience, and some of that story content has actually gotten more enjoyable in recent memory, with a pretty fun bank robbery, base game characters making an appearance with some missions, and even roles that you can play as now. Although this could start a long debate on why single player DLC should have been considered over this, but we'll save that for another day. Bethesda VP Pete Hines has indicated content like Wastelanders will not be the sole focus moving forward, and that's understandable, but if this live service has a chance to succeed long term, more content like this will be needed, because this is the first time in forever that I can actually see more than a small group giving a crap about this Fallout spinoff, and that's quite telling. So circling back to a point I made earlier, Bethesda still has many problems, many issues. I do find it encouraging that at least Fallout 76 recently addressed one of those problems with a really solid dialogue system, but with the Elder Scrolls 6 and Starfield, I hope we see more of Bethesda listening to criticism. I have my doubts that will actually happen, as it seems monetization will be a big focus with all games moving forward. It appears the creation engine will continue to just be updated, and I don't think Bethesda will address one of their biggest weaknesses, which is writing, but we shall see. Anyway, what do you make of Wastelanders? Have you tried it? If not, do you plan to try it? And what do you make of Bethesda Game Studios' last number of years? Do you think the company is moving back in the right direction, learning from their many mistakes over the years like with 76, or not? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, but thank you for watching. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this video or if you found any informative value, and make sure to follow my other social media accounts for updates on new videos. Links are always down in the description below. I'm most active on Twitter, giving opinions on news that I do not always get into video form, so do make sure to follow me over there. Also check out my Discord for all sorts of discussion on games, and again, thank you for joining. Consider subscribing for more videos like this, and I'll see you later.